Hello and welcome to the Catch a Lift Coaches Corner. I am Cal head coach Melissa Luke, and this week I am honored to welcome retired U.S. Air Force veteran Chris Ferrell to today's show. Chris is a U.S. Air Force veteran, former police officer, combat training specialist, and Cal veteran athlete. Welcome to this week's episode of the Coaches Corner. Chris, welcome.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. It's so good to see you and have you on with us today.
Likewise.
Well, we've got a lot we want to cover today, Chris. Jump right in. Why don't we start today with you just telling us a bit about your life growing up?
Okay. So I am Chris Ferrell. I'm originally from, I guess I would say, Bossier City, Louisiana. I'm a military brat. My dad was in the Navy. So he married a Filipino woman when he was stationed in the Philippines. And that's my mom. She is currently a civilian out at Barksdale. I grew up playing sports my entire life. Baseball, football, anything that you could really just get your hands or your feet on. And then have two brothers. One is currently active duty, and the other one is still back home, and he's just out there grinding. Kind of fast forward, went to high school in Bossier City, Louisiana at Bossier High, and I was there my senior year when 9/11 happened, which is kind of what shifted where I was going to go at in my life as an adult.
Let's talk about that a little bit, Chris. How did 9/11 influence you to serve?
So I felt at a young age, I had a really strong feeling that I was going to serve in the military at some point. In my youth, my teenage years, I thought I was going to be a pro baseball player, just like millions of other kids. I thought that was awesome. And it got to the point where I felt like I was pretty good, but there was a lot of kids that were a lot better, more athletically inclined than me at that time. And in my senior year, I was actually in ROTC. It was my first period class, and I was in my chief's office with my wife. Now we were high school sweethearts, or are high school sweethearts. And we walked back into the ROTC room, and the TV was on. Everybody was watching it, and I thought it was a movie.
Right.
It was live footage of the towers going down. So at that point, I knew that that's what I was going to do. In some capacity, I was going to serve our country to fight against terrorism.
Right. So you were a senior at that time, Chris. Coming out of high school then, how did you join up in the military? What did that look like for you getting in?
So I was in college. My wife and I were in college, and then my niece, Brooke Marie, she ended up having open heart surgery. So my niece is Down syndrome, and she was extremely young at the time when she had open heart surgery.
Right.
So we traveled out here to New Mexico, where I'm currently at now, from Louisiana, and took some time off from school for my niece's open heart surgery. Came back home, and then we realized we're like, let's move out there. So Lauren and I packed up, moved out here to Cannon Air Force Base, where my in-laws were stationed at the time.
Okay.
But they weren't my in-laws yet. They just kind of took me, and I'm very thankful for them doing that. And then did a whole bunch of odd jobs out here. I felt like if I was in my in-laws' home for any extended period of time, I was kind of a freeloader. So I worked between 3 and 5 jobs at a time, just so that I let them know that I appreciate what they did and I was not trying to stay there.
Right.
And then after about 8 months or so, I started having that itch, and then being here at a military installation, at the time it was ACC, Air Combat Command.
Okay.
And I knew I was going to join. So I go to the recruiter's office that is here at the fabulous tiny Clovis Mall. I guess that's what they would call it. You could see from one end to the other. And went into the recruiter's office, and I didn't even tell my wife that I was going. Like I said, we were just dating at the time. And I went and talked to the recruiter. And at that time, all I wanted to do was combat controller pararescue. Did the pass test. There was, 19 years old, so there was no issues. Then we did the medical side of it. And my eye exam was supposed to be 20/70 correctable down to 20/20. Come to find out my eyes were 2200. So that automatically disqualified me.
Right.
So I asked him, I was like, well, I'm not going to be behind a desk. That's not what I want to do.
Yep.
And he said, you could do EOD. And I asked him, I was like, well, what's that? He said, explosive ordnance disposal. So you disarm bombs. I was like, let me get this straight. So I can't be a pararescueman or a combat controller with bad eyesight, but you'll let me disarm bombs.
Yeah.
He was like, yeah. I was like, sure, sign me up. Still had no clue what I was getting into.
Yeah.
Came home, told my girlfriend at the time, now current wife, that that's what I was going to do. So it came as a bit of a shock, but
I bet
she was excited, nervous. You know, the war was kicking off. My father-in-law had already gone to Iraq for shock and awe. So we watched all that happen, and we knew that he was there, and he was running logistics for the Air Force out of there. So he was running a lot of convoys and everything. And signed up, and I was on the delayed enlistment program for like 9 months to get a slot at EOD school. And then I joined from there, got on a bus to Amarillo, went through MEPS, and then that started the training.
Talk to us about what you remember from EOD school. What was that like for you?
So the first part of EOD school was at Medina, which is in San Antonio. I was starting to get extremely antsy because at the time it was a 1 week preliminary course just to make sure that you're not scared of explosives, that you can get basic recognition of ordnance. So that was 1 week. And I graduated basic training in October of that year. And I was there until February of the next year for an EOD school slot. So like 6 months almost that I had to wait there. So during that time at Medina, you had pararescue pipeline students there, combat control pipeline students, and SEER pipeline students. I'm sitting there, you know, I'm doing details. So I was like, this sucks. I was like, all I'm doing is mopping floors and polishing chrome. And I'm watching all of these guys who are going to be hitters, you know, go through their training. So I'm getting disheartened at that time. Then I finally get a slot to EOD school. And it's down in Fort Walton Beach, Florida at Eglin Air Force Base. It's actually off base. It's out in the Blue Water Bay area. And got to EOD school, and it was one of the most mentally challenging things I had ever been through. You know, you're going to class all day long. You can't bring any study material home. So you have a 3-hour study hall. So you're basically cramming everything you can, trying to regurgitate it and memorize things that you may or may not be able to remember. And then test on it the next day.
Oof.
So when it came to that, your sleep, your physical fitness, all of that stuff had to be all in sync, because if one of them was off, you weren't going to make it through school. And at that time, to go through from day one to graduation day was 6 months straight. To get through. Now you're looking at close to a year to get through the pipeline.
Wow.
So
that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that with us, Chris. How long would it be for you from the end of EOD school to when you would deploy the first time?
I graduated EOD school in 2004 and deployed in early 2005. So Chris, I was immediately.
So it was a very quick turnaround.
It was.
And that first deployment, was that to Afghanistan?
It was. So my first deployment was with my shop. So at the time we deployed with our flights. So the shops that you're assigned to, your unit. And as time has transitioned, you do kind of get mixed and matched and everything like that, depending on what the request for forces and everything is. But as a 19-year-old, I was a E3, and I was like, I'm going to fight.
Yeah, of course.
Got the tasking, and it came down for Afghanistan, and I was extremely disheartened because all of my friends were in Iraq.
Right.
So I was, at that time again, I was like, all my friends are there. I'm not hearing anything about improvised explosive devices or anything like that coming out of Afghanistan. There was some rudimentary ones, but all my friends that I'd gone through school with, they're all there fighting IED after IED after IED.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Here I am going to the mountains of Afghanistan, not knowing what I was going to come across, and it ended up being an extreme blessing for me. I say that in regards of the scope of the job that I started running out there, and then a lot of the dismounted operations and the um, air insert operations and the different units that I got to mix in with. Because when we were at Bagram, we had an 8-man EOD shop, and we just kind of got pushed out to any units that requested us. So we had a wide array of different incidents that we were
Yeah.
going to.
Oh my gosh, I bet. Chris, what do you remember from your first time in combat?
So I remember driving in bolt-on armored Humvees.
Yep.
Now older me, I'm like, wow, that was a terrible idea.
Yeah.
During the Russian-Afghan war, there was ordnance dumped everywhere. There was remnants of war all over the place. So we spent a lot of time responding out to that. There was landmines everywhere. It's one of the most mined countries in the world. So we were taking care of all of this stuff. We were getting into troops in contact, multiple times throughout the year. Nothing super crazy. And then I was on a mission, and we were at a Afghan army compound the day prior, myself and one of my team leaders, and they figured out that it was an old Russian ammo supply point. So there was nothing we could do that day. We had figured we need to have a more large-scale operation to start clearing out all these 152 millimeter projectiles and all of this ordnance that was just found everywhere. So the next day we go out there and we are getting rid of ordnance and consolidating, because we're going to do it out at the East River Range.
Okay.
Well, we were going to destroy everything. My team leader, who is still active duty and he's still an absolute gangster, he's a senior master sergeant right now. His name is Chris Ramica. I was dragging some ordnance, some old Russian bombs up the hill so we could get them loaded up. And my team leader was down there with our commander, our civil engineer commander, retired Major Matthew Conlon. I remember I was talking to my team lead, Sergeant Birchfield, and I looked down and saw a cloud go up. Chris was down there. Major Conlon was down there. And James Wesson was down there. He's a civil engineer. I remember unhooking the bomb and then driving my Humvee down there as fast as I possibly could to get to him. I got down there. Chris was on the ground. Matt was on the ground. James was on the ground. And Chris, you could tell that his leg was gone. So I immediately started working on him, looked up, trying to find anybody else that was coming down. And the engineer unit that we had supporting us, they all stayed up on the ridge line. So I'm a 19-year-old kid by myself, with nobody down there and nobody coming down. Our Birchfield went trying to get air assets in so that they could land a medevac here. And I start working on Chris. I look at Matt. Matt is bleeding out of the backs of his legs. His leg is shattered. Chris's leg is missing, and then his fingertips were extremely long, because when the landmine was stepped on, and it was an anti-personnel mine, but he had a cartridge in his hand for RPGs, and it sympathetically detonated. And so his fingertips were like that long, and they had cauterized.
Right.
Chris's leg was in the ground. I lifted it. I got sprayed. And then in my head, I was like, oh, this is it. I'm brand new to this, and it's time to start working. I don't want my teammate to die.
Right.
So as I'm working on Chris, getting a tourniquet on him and then getting quick clot on his leg, and at the time we had powdered quick clot, so I didn't have gloves on. It was not the best. That's not what I was thinking about at all. And then I remember looking up, and there was a minefield down to the south of us. And I remember watching my teammate. He was a senior airman at the time, and he's still active duty as well. I think he's a AGR now, so active guard reserve, I think is what it is. And I watched him sprint across a landmine field with his CLS bag, and it was just waving, and he looked like David Hasselhoff coming across. I was like, Steve's about to get killed. and he jumped over the tanglefoot, which was old, like an old mine line. So kind of like sea wire and everything like that. He jumped over it, stood over the top, and he's like, "What can I do?" And then next thing I know, Steve starts working on Matt, Major Conlon. We get Chris stabilized, and then we start working on Matt. We go to lift up Matt's leg to elevate it, and it just kind of crumbled. So at this time, and we saw where he had chunks ripped out of his hamstring. So we start working on him to patch that up. And then we take apart his M16 because we didn't have splints at the time that were long enough to secure his leg and to stabilize it. So we took the hand guards off of his M16 and then used that as a splint. And then we were able to get them medevaced out of here. The unit that we were supporting called in the medevac, and the coordinates that they called in was landing in the minefield. So we had to wave them off, and then they were able to reset them to where we could get them out. And the only other person that came down to help was the Army medic. And the medic he was young. He turned out to be an absolute stud, but I had to hit him at the time. He was, like I said, it was just like us, first time. And then he was going to initiate some hextend on Chris, and then his hands were just shaking. So, and he was just sitting there. And then once we got him snapped out of it, he was money. And then that was my first major incident in 2005 and my welcome to war. And I thought I was like, this is exactly how it's supposed to be. I was like, it sucks because it was Chris's anniversary with Sonia. That wasn't the greatest thing. And one of the things that Chris asked was for me to make sure that all of his manhood was still there. It was. So, and like I said, and he's deployed multiple times now as an amputee. And it's
That's incredible.
Stud.
Yeah. Wow. That is just incredible. Chris, so you would go on to deploy multiple times to Afghanistan and Iraq. Would you talk to us a little bit more about some of those deployments?
Yeah. So 2005 happened. And as a 19-year-old kid, I come home. Chris ended up being the first Air Force EOD technician that was injured in combat, and in this combat. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that actually for a few years. I thought that some of our other teammates were injured first, but come to find out it was Chris. So as a 19-year-old kid, you have all this spotlight on you.
Right.
You're like, big chest. You're like, yeah, this is what I'm meant to do.
Right.
Well, it kind of put me on the wrong road immediately, because I was like, I'm untouchable. There's nothing you can do to me. I had a phenomenal supervisor named Quincy Banks. He was my first wall-to-wall counseling. He was amazing human being. But he had told me, he was like, Chris, war is what it's going to be. There's always going to be war. There's always enemies. There's always people fighting over things. There's always young men dying for old people's arguments.
Right. Yeah.
Which that is the history
sums
of the world.
Sums it up pretty well, right?
Yes. So all I can think of, he got me on the straight line, got my moral compass set, and next thing I know, I'm getting tasked again. And I was like, cool. So I ended up in Afghanistan in 2005, 2007, 9, 10, 12, and 13, and I was in Iraq in 2008. I had some phenomenal team leaders, and I had some not so great ones that I was able to learn from. As each deployment went on, when I joined, the only thing I wanted to do when I became an EOD technician was I wanted to save lives. That's the only thing that I could think about. As time went along, more deployments and more combat, more war.
Right.
It went from I want to save lives to I want to take lives. And then that starts to consume you.
Right.
Because your outlook changes. I only wanted to be with units that were doing highly kinetic missions, that we were going out and we were, for a lack of a better term, chopping the head off the snake.
Right.
That's all I wanted to do. It's the only thing I cared about. Every deployment, more and more would happen. We had a lot of injuries, a lot of KIAs for our coalition forces, American and our teammates from other countries.
Right.
And then as each deployment went on, we moved into my deployment to Afghanistan in 2009. We were down in Kandahar, and we were with the EOD Bravo flight down there. I was extremely happy to get there because I hadn't had a chance to go there. I'd been all over Afghanistan, but I wanted South Afghanistan because that's where all the heavy fighting was going on.
Okay.
And then when we're going through our spin up training, that's when we transitioned from it was all of your flight deploying together, but we just didn't have the personnel anymore. And since we were on a 1-to-1 dwell, it was you were deployed, you came home, you were back for as minimal amount of time, and then you were out the door again.
Right.
And that became what my identity. That's all I cared about. Home to me wasn't actually home. So my priorities changed. Here was my downtime from actually being home. To me, home was some foreign dirt, fighting against an enemy, being with my team. That's what I cared about. I had a family that was second and third fiddle. So I get what I want. I go down to South Afghanistan. We're in our spin up training, and I end up getting teamed up with some phenomenal techs. Retired Tech Sergeant Derek Victor, and then I think Luke ended up retiring as well as a Tech Sergeant, Luke Mefford. And then once we got there and we started going through our training, they were building a special operations EOD support team. So at that time, we go through all of our training and then they select a team, and it ended up being myself, Derek, and Tom Pilla, who is now a chief. And all those individuals are guys that have kind of helped shape myself, my personality, my career, my outlook on war fighting, and my outlook on explosive ordnance disposal. So one of our teammates very early in deployment got injured, and you have back bases that you call people in from if you have to backfill somebody. Well, we all put in the same request for the same person, Tech Sergeant Tony Campbell. We wanted him to come join us, and he did. Loved Tony. He was a Cincinnati police officer. He loved the Cincinnati Bengals. I hated him. He always wore this stupid Cincinnati Bengals hat. I hated it, but I loved the dude.
Yeah.
He wanted to start running special operations missions. So our tasking was to make sure that he was ready. So he was getting himself physically ready, running him through training scenarios, doing hot washes on all the different operations we ran on, and then he started running them with us. We kind of got pushed out to everybody. Every team that requested us, we would go because it was such a high IED prevalence at that time.
Right.
So in December of 2009, we were supporting 22nd Special Air Service out of England. And, we're lowly EOD guys that just want to help any way that we can. We're not operators. We're there as force multipliers for these guys.
Right.
And we want to do everything we can to keep them safe while they're doing what they need to do. So we were on a killer capture, and I was an IED facilitator in Kajaki, Afghanistan. We insert in, and we start the long dark walk, trying to get there quiet as possible, clearing compounds, and getting to our target. We end up linking back up. I'll never forget it. So we're in this compound that we'd already taken and cleared, and we have one more compound to go to. And there, when they're hanging up laundry, they have clotheslines hanging. And Tony, all he could talk about, I said, "Man, I really got to piss, man. I've got to piss." And I was like, "Man, go piss." So he had his NVGs up, and he clipped one of these clotheslines and just ate it all over the ground. So us, the SAS team, our Brit support infantry guys, everybody's laughing,
Yeah.
So then we have to reset ourselves. Now we're going to hit the last compound. It was me and Derek, Tom and Tony. This is December 15th, 2009, 10 days before Christmas, just a little before 2 a.m. We're in a staggered clearance because we're trying to clear into this compound so that we can do the hit on it. In Afghanistan, it's super hot in the day, doesn't matter what time of year, and then it's super cold at night. So if you can imagine the cold air that you're breathing in, it felt like little needles that were piercing you from the inside every breath you took. And we start clearing, and it's quiet. It's eerily quiet. We're moving, we're clearing. There's debris all over the place. So our detectors are picking up different things. About 2 a.m., Tom was clearing a doorway. Tony had stepped out to get long access security for him. I remember looking up. Derek was clearing, and I was Derek's rear. And Tony stepped on something. Cloud went up, and then smoke filled the entire space. It was dust, smoke from the explosion. And my ears were ringing. All I could see was shadows running through. And you could hear the screaming, but not the screaming like we think about. If you were to take a pillow and put it against your face and yell into it, that was a sound that you could hear from the explosion. I remember looking down. Derek was on the ground next to me. His face was covered in blood. I looked down at me, and I had blood all over me. I didn't know whose blood it was. I didn't know if it was Derek's, if it was mine, Tony's, Tom's.
Right.
And then I remember reaching up, and then I was bleeding out of both of my ears. And then in an instant, all the sound came back. It was loud, and it was chaotic. I could see Tom crawling through the doorway, and we started screaming at him, telling him to stay where he's at. Tony was face down on the ground. He had his hand up, almost like he was saying his last goodbye to us. It felt like minutes, and it was only seconds. Tony's hand hit the ground, and you could hear his last exhale leave his body. Knew we had to get to him. So cleared up to Tom so our docs could get to Tom, get him taken care of and safe. Then we had to get to Tony. Tony's body was laying there. He's cut off, laying in a puddle of his own blood. And we needed a clear path. So hooked on a rope to him, started pulling his body out. And if you can picture the path, so if you were to take a paintbrush and dip it in red paint, that little bucket you have of paint, that real dark, thick red, and if you were to take one paint stroke, put it on the paper and drag it, and then it starts fading out. That's what it looked like after Tony's body was dragged. Then you get to look at his face. Eyes wide open. It looked like doll's eyes, or glass. And it was like something that just pierced through me. And all I could think is, my friend's gone. It's like 10 days before Christmas. He had kids, had a wife. And then all I could think is, now we got to get to the bird.
Right.
And then I forgot a lot of different pieces. I remember being on site, and then the next thing I remember, we were on the medevac. And I remember looking at this PJ, just a big, giant human being, had a wall of all his medical stuff behind him. He had 3 casualties, me, Derek, and Tom on there. And he was just not looking at anything and just working on all 3 of us.
Right.
And then the next thing I remember, I'm in a hospital bed. And I knew Tony had already gone. Tom was in surgery. And then the only thing I could feel at that time was just extreme anger. I was sad.
Right.
But it was one of those things that I was like, nope, take that, just like the other incidents that you've had with Wilhelm or Filchi or any of them, bury it. You don't need it right now. You're fine. So they tried to, we get medevaced out of Camp Bastion, out in the Helmand province. So it was Leatherneck and Bastion together, and we were on the Brit side at the hospital. We end up back at Kandahar after they clear us to go back. And then I remember talking to my leadership back home. Obviously, they had to notify Lauren that I was injured and that something had happened. What I didn't know was my supervisor back home was telling Lauren that, hey, he's coming home. He's going to go to launch school. He's coming home. That was nowhere near in any plan that I had.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
So when I got approached about it, I called Lauren and, you know, just let her know, hey, I'm okay. This is kind of what happened without getting into too much detail.
Right.
And then she's like, so when are you coming home? I was like, I'm not.
Yeah.
So needless to say, that was not a great conversation because she told me that
I'm sure
she was told I was coming home. And I told my supervisor, I called him on the sat phone. I was like, I'm not coming home. I was like, unless you've got an army of dudes bigger than me and stronger than me in a cage, I'm not coming home. And he's like, why? I was like, would you? And Ray told me, he was like, no. I was like, let me be clear. I was like, I can still operate. I was like, if someone replaces me and they get killed in my stead, I'll never be able to forgive myself. And that was all I had in my head. So we talked about it, and I was able to go back to fully mission capable out there and continue to operate. And then we ran into more issues throughout that deployment and more incidents that took the lives of some really good people. And then I came home and I felt like I was not changed. They made me see doctors and all that stuff. I had zero interest in that. I was like, no. I was like, I'll find my solace in the gym. I was like, and just send me back to war. Well, they changed my orders. I was supposed to go to Hill Air Force Base in Utah, and I got sent down to Eglin Air Force Base, which is a beautiful, beachy area, and I got put there as an instructor. They wanted to take all the combat guys and start putting them down at the schoolhouse. So I ended up as an instructor for 4 years at EOD school, which I loved. You're able to kind of mold the next generation and actually give them firsthand knowledge of what they need to do and what they need to be to support these ground units throughout their careers. And at that time, I was struggling. I was struggling bad. But the way that I looked at it and the way that my teammates looked at me, it's like, oh, nothing's wrong with Chris, so there's not supposed to be anything wrong with me. And then I deployed again to Afghanistan. And I deployed out of the schoolhouse, which was supposed to be a non-deployable position, but I still went.
Yeah.
Then I came home, and my wife has been with me since we were 17. So we're going on 20 years now. And it's not been an easy road. Not even close. I was not even close to a good husband, not a good father. I was a good provider. That was it. Only thing I cared about was war. And eventually it catches up to you. So as I'm in DC at Andrews Air Force Base, or Joint Base Andrews, and my primary duty with my team there was Secret Service support, VIPSA. So we supported the White House, the VPs, every diplomatic thing that you can think of, we supported it as bomb techs. As we're going through all that, I became extremely destructive in my life. Didn't care about anything going on. And then I got notified as everything was crashing down for me. I had my first suicide attempt. And from there, it kind of snowballed. And the only thing I wanted was, I just wanted to be done with it. I was tired of the nightmares. I was tired of the guilt, primarily the guilt and the shame. And that was the things that overtook me the most. I had no outlet. I had no why.
Yeah.
The doctors did brain scans on me. Brain scans came back at that time was 28 dead spots on my brain. The last MRI they did showed 32. My C2 through C8, T11, T12, and L4 through S1 are all fractured from explosions and crashes and, things that come with the job.
Yeah.
And again, I continued to fight it, and I refused. I was like, I'm not going anywhere. And then I was informed that I would never deploy in combat again. When you're 19 years old and that's the only thing you've known your entire adult life, and that's what you've built yourself around,
right?
That's taking every piece of you away. And I got lost. I had no why anymore. And I thought that my why was completely gone. And that started the worst in me. And I've had 4 suicide attempts. I'm good at a lot of things. Apparently, I'm not that good at that, and it's a selfish thing. And at that time, I understand struggles now from every point of view.
Right.
And it's one of those things that I thought that if you weren't with me, you weren't on my team, you weren't in the same dirt, in the same fights that I was in, you have no say-so in struggling. Suck it up, deal with it. Oh, man, was I wrong. There's so much different types of trauma out there that affects everybody. And the thing that I've come to realize is that every human being is born with a certain size cup. Some cups are bigger than others. I felt like I was born with a very big cup that I could take a lot. But regardless of the size cup that you have, the things that are getting poured in, your trauma, your pain, your grief, your sadness, your shame, as it continues to fill up, it doesn't matter what size you have. If you don't take time to start dumping some of it out, eventually your cup's going to overflow, and everything that's going inside of it is going to spill out.
Right.
And everything that it spills out and touches is affected. Friends, family, job, your personal sanity. I didn't realize that. And then I was able to meet Miss Lynn in some of the worst times of my life. And she told me her story and her brother's story and what she does and the reason Catch a Lift was started. And it started me back on the right path to recovery and seeking help and trying to find a new why. And that's where I'm at now.
Oh, man. First of all, Chris, thank you so much for your service to our great country. And thank you for so openly sharing with us about this. Would you talk to us a little bit? Something you mentioned earlier in the show, was this, it got to a point for you where, it was a constant craving for combat, and it turned into, you wanted to be there, you wanted to be in the thick of it, What did you do or how have you been able to work through that and kind of overcome that craving for that combat that you experienced as a young man?
So the craving is never actually gone. There's still parts of me that, it's just why I think I became a police officer. Because I have this innate need to help those who can't help themselves. And I felt like if I masked it with, I'm doing this to help others, but also inside of me, inside my head, I was also feeling a craving that just I was always hungry for. And there's no matter how much you eat, you're still hungry. You're starving. And when I was young, that's the only thing I cared about. It has subsided now. I've been through a lot of different therapies. I've been in inpatient programs. I've been through a lot of MRIs, CAT scans, all of that. And then I've been able to have some phenomenal people in my life, which not everybody is blessed to have.
Right.
I had to find a new why. I had to find it. And I can tell you, if it wasn't for my wife, Lauren, and my 3 kids. So I have 3 kids, a 13-year-old daughter named Piper who has seen and witnessed everything. She has watched my collapse. And then I have 2 boys, an 8-year-old named Maximus and a 6-year-old named Titan. One of them, Titan, wants to be a police officer. That's all he's ever wanted since the time he could talk. Maximus wants to serve in some kind of military capacity. So I had to find a why. It's like, you can't be angry all the time. You can't want and crave chaos all the time. It's not healthy. And I had to start learning how to find peace. That's the only thing I want. It's just peace. And to get away from that craving all the time, I had to submerge myself into other things. One thing that I've always loved being in is in the gym, in an iron paradise. That was where I didn't have to think about anything. I could just go in there and blow off every bit of steam I had, but I wasn't doing it with any purpose.
Right.
I was just doing it because it's the only thing that required no brain power for me. And then it changed. It changed to health and wellness and trying to figure out nutrition and everything like that. And then that, if I was physically stable, I could be emotionally stable as well. And then I could start putting the pieces of my life back together. Because at the end of the day, when all you crave is chaos, you start leaving these shattered pieces of you behind you. You're not even looking back at it, but there's always somebody back there, someone who cares for you, someone who loves you, somebody who needs you to be whole again, picking up all those shattered pieces. So at some point when you're ready, they can put all those pieces back together. And that's how I ended up in the spot that I'm at now, where I don't crave it like I used to. And I don't need it anymore.
Right.
What I need my kids to love me. I need to be a good father. I need to be a good husband. I need to be a good person. I need to try to help any way that I can, regardless of how open I have to be about it and how much I have to expose myself. I don't care. To me, you can come at me with everything that you want. It doesn't bother me. I've dealt with enough in my life that words are words. That's all it is to me. I have to fight that person in the mirror every day.
Going back a little bit, Chris, to when you gave what I think is just a terrific analogy with the cup, right? And that cup starts to get full and overflowing, and what happens as a result, like you described. Is fitness the catalyst now that you use to kind of empty that cup or keep it at a manageable level? Or how does fitness play in with that cup analogy?
I tell you, fitness has been, it plays an integral role in me dumping out my cup. Because what I used to do is I used to bring work home. Always. I would bring it home no matter how hard you tried not to. And that's what ended up making me destructive in my personal life.
Yeah.
Because I would take all of that and I would compartmentalize it. And then even when I was training for another war, another fight. That's what I was training for. I wasn't training to deal with myself and deal with my things. And then once I started figuring that out, now I come in here and I choose something, whether it's in my home gym or it's in the local gym. I take my time now and I focus on one thing. I don't even listen to music anymore when I train. I
Yeah.
listen to podcasts. I listen to military veterans. I listen to motivational speakers. I listen to um, people who have experienced struggle their entire life, because then
Yeah.
it resets the reason why I'm in there. Because just because you're in there training and you're trying to make yourself healthier doesn't mean that you only have to make your body healthy.
Right.
And that was
For
the thing that
sure.
I had to figure out. I had to mesh both of them together. So it plays a extremely pivotal role in my recovery and in my dumping out my cup.
Yeah. How have you handled, setbacks, whether they be kind of, physical or more mental setbacks, in the gym? A lot of different stuff can happen. How do you keep on that course with the fitness and not just kind of let either the busyness of life or just setbacks in general kind of derail you in that regard?
So that's man, that's 99% of the human population.
Yeah.
It's very easy to hit that snooze button every morning. So for me, I've been through multiple phases where I thought I was getting up to here on my recovery level. Like I'd started way down low and I was like, you know what? I'm managing, I'm doing well.
Right.
And then you have something that happens that
Yeah.
resets you back to where you were. You become that
Yep.
angry,
Exactly.
spiteful,
Yep.
just I don't need the world anymore.
Yep.
And then what do you end up doing? You end up sitting on a recliner. My kids are running around me and I'm in the same room, but might as well be
Yeah,
a
you're
thousand
really
miles
not though.
away.
Yeah, you're not there.
You
You're not
know,
present.
and that's the thing. There's a difference between being here and being present. And that was the thing that I was going away from. So every time that I had my setbacks in that regards, I would sit and I'd go to each one of my kids' room every morning while they were sleeping, look at each one of them, because I had to develop what my why was again. That's why I'm doing things. That's why I have to be the way that I am. Because if I'm not, you have three sets of eyes that are looking at you, that your dad, you're this guy that other people have told me about, but I don't even know you. All these other people that you've been at war with, they know you better than I do, and I'm your kid. So I had to figure out where my balance was. And when I started hitting those setbacks mentally or physically, you get injuries in the gym all the time, training outside, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And that's something that can defeat you immediately. You know what?
Oh, absolutely. Yep. That can
This means
derail the whole. Yeah, that can derail the whole train.
100%. And you're just like, you know what? This is a sign. I'm not supposed to be doing this. So I'm going to let it go. And then once you start doing that, then you start remembering how crappy you felt during that time. And you're like, you know what? I need to start this again. So it's a continual roller coaster through all of it. And support. I think that's the biggest way that I've been able to get through it. And it doesn't matter what your support ends up being. It doesn't matter if it's a family, if it's your friends, if it's Catch a Lift, if it's a different organization that reaches out or you reach out to them.
Yep.
You have to have support somehow, because no matter how strong you are, you cannot do this on your own. Your shoulders can only carry so much. And that's how I found my way out of it.
Chris, what would you say to veterans? Because I mean, you're completely right. What would you say to veterans who are struggling to kind of, humble themselves and say, "I need help. I can't do this on my own." What do you say to vets that are having trouble getting to that point?
It's not easy. Nothing about it's easy. You're going to have times that every single day that whether you have a suicidal ideation or you have, plans or whatever it ends up being, nothing about this process is easy, but nothing in life that's worth it is easy. So you have to keep fighting for it. I was just in a briefing the other day with Mr. and Mrs. Satterley. So they're part of an organization called All Secure. And he's a former operator. She's a spouse. And it was the first time that I got to sit down and really listen, and everything that they had talked about within family, themselves, destruction, all of that impacted me right away, because we talked about suicide. We talked about how it affects veterans, and not only veterans. One of the things that I've realized when I started doing things with wounded warriors and Air Force wounded warriors and other service wounded warriors, um, like we were talking about earlier, I always thought that if you weren't part of my operations, you have no reason to be struggling.
Yeah.
And then I started realizing, so when you start looking at trauma, whether it's combat related trauma, sexual trauma, single incident traumas, vehicle accidents, it doesn't matter what it ends up being, domestic abuse, everyone reacts with the same parts of your brain when it comes to trauma. And this is something I didn't know. And that was the meat-headed side of me was like, you don't know what it's like.
Yeah.
But then I started looking at it as in types of fruit. So bananas, apples, oranges, doesn't matter. All of them are different. All the fruits are different, but they all go in this same basket. And this basket is all that trauma. So it doesn't matter if you're an apple or you're an orange or you're a banana, depending on what your trauma is. All of it goes into the same basket.
Yep.
All of it affects the brain the exact same way. And I think that's what ends up happening with a lot of servicemen and servicewomen, that when they start struggling with it, it's nobody understands. Nobody cares.
Yep.
Nobody's listening to me. They're hearing me, but they're not listening to me.
Yep.
So my recommendation and what has helped me is you have to talk about it. Whether it's with a medical professional that you trust, and you're not going to always trust them. I can tell you that from firsthand experience. I've had very few that I've trusted.
Yep.
Or if it's with people who are of like mind, or people who actually care. And it doesn't matter whether it's family, friends, teammates. You're sitting there and you're bottling all that up here. So it's affecting you here, and it's affecting you here. There is no shame. There is no weakness in showing that you're struggling. There isn't. And if anything, it's strength. Because what ends up happening is when you start thinking it's a weakness and you start letting it eat at you, and it starts eating at your soul, and you get to a point where you're like, you know what? I'm better off not here. And you couldn't be more wrong.
Right.
There is a ripple effect that's caused from it. You take a stone and throw it into a lake, it's going to impact one point, but you're going to see the ripples all the way down.
For sure. Yep.
So it's not just you. Everybody that has been touched by you in their life will be affected. So talk. Listen, not hear. And then if you don't want to do either of that, write it down. Write. Get it out of your mental space and onto paper or into someone else's ear. That's what I think is, that's what's been the most beneficial to me in that regards. And I've been very blessed to have some very good people put into my life. And I feel like everyone does have, even if it's only a few, everyone's got someone or a few people that they trust with everything in their lives.
Thank you for that, Chris. So today, you're a combat training specialist for AFSTOC. Would you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I was a police officer for the last year here in Clovis, New Mexico. I was a GS employee prior for 2.5 years. Also here at AFSTOC, I was a range inspector, so I worked on the bombing range and just kind of messed with UXOs and getting people in their training areas and things like that. I got bored with that. I got bored very quickly with that. So then I took a contract to Iraq, and I was going to train counter IED to Iraqis. And then what do you know? COVID happened. And,
Yep.
So that ended up a very weird time frame. So I came home, and then as I was sitting here one day, I was like, you know what? I was like, I still have this need that I want to serve in some capacity. So I became a Clovis City police officer, and I loved it. I really did. To me, especially with the environment that we're in now. I come from a blended family. My mom is Filipino. My dad is Irish descent, Texan, big, tall, white guy. And then my stepfather is African American. So I come from a blended family. And seeing everything that's been going on in the world and in this nation right now, I was like, the only way to facilitate change is to be part of change.
Yeah. Right.
So that's why I had no law enforcement background at all. I was a disarm bombs. That's what I did. And so I did that. And fast forward, we start moving forward. And then the actual position that I moved here for was this position as a part of the combat training element. So in layman's terms, you're OP4, opposing forces. So we provide opposing forces scenarios for special operations teams that are coming in, getting ready to prepare for deployments. So we run multitude of training scenarios. We do water survival training. We do all kinds of different training for these teams that are getting ready to go out the door. So that's what we do. And it spans from everything from force on force combat to IED scenarios to down man drill, all kinds of things. And we have a 70,000 acre range that,
Oh my gosh.
that we have a lot of capabilities on.
Yeah.
So I'm at home. I told myself that I was going to try to pull away from military stuff, but it keeps on drawing me back. So here I am again.
What would you say to yourself now if you could go back and talk to young Chris, young 19-year-old Chris going into combat for that first time in Afghanistan, upset because you're not in Iraq. What would you tell yourself now?
I would tell myself to pace yourself, that there's always going to be plenty of bad people out there. And it doesn't always have to be your particular fight. And that's not just combat itself. That's every fight. Young Chris liked to get himself involved in everything. And it ended up affecting old Chris. So here I am, old Chris. Pace yourself, prioritize, because it's very easy to get lost. You start getting into that, you start getting that taste, and that's the only thing you want to do.
Right.
Take time and dump out your cup. For the longest time, all I did was just compartmentalize everything. And if I would have taken some time to dump more and more out, I would have been in the position I'm in now. I'm very happy where I'm at now. Let's get that clear.
Yeah.
I'm very happy where I'm at now. But it took a long road to get here. I retired in 2017, and here we are in 2021, and I'm just now getting to that point that I'm like, you know what, this is okay. You're every day's a battle, but as long as you keep fighting it, you're okay, and you just got to keep moving forward. That's what I'd tell young stupid Chris.
No, I like it. I like that a lot. That's a message for all of us for sure. Chris, so the last thing I want to kind of finish up with you today, you mentioned, being able to meet Lynn and the subsequent impact that would have on your life and, Catch a Lift coming into your life. What does it mean to you today to be sitting here as a Catch a Lift athlete?
I'll tell you, it's humbling because I know the athletes that are part of Catch a Lift. I see these, for a lack of a better term, because I feel like the term hero gets thrown out inadvertently all the time,
Right.
But in every aspect of it, that's the way I look at the athletes over here, in one way or the other. You've got some amazing human beings that are part of this program, and the outreach that happens from Catch a Lift, it's something that Lynn or any of you on this staff, you'll never really truly know the extent of your outreach and how many people it's actually touching and what kind of difference it's making in their lives. You only get the bits and pieces of it that get reported back to you. You don't get it all, on days where for the veterans that are struggling, and then the things that are provided from Catch a Lift for them, and instead of the ones that are having a lot of social anxiety and they don't want to be around people, they don't trust
Right.
people, they don't have to go anywhere. They just walk out into their garage,
Yeah.
and then they're able to reset themselves. And then just the foundation built within it, being able to speak to different individuals that have different experiences and same experiences, having a coaching staff that can actually guide you down the right path. You have your health and wellness, you have your mental aspects of it, you have your physical trainers. It's amazing with what Lynn and her organization has been able to do in such a short amount of time.
Yeah. Right.
And how many people it's actually touched. That's the thing that kind of is a little mind-boggling, because it went from, here is the concept of what Lynn wanted to start to do, and then just from the time that I met her in 2017 at that Chick-fil-A at the mall to where it is now, it's completely mind-numbing. It just really is, because it's just such a wide span now nationally.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful because I'm able to sit here and talk with you. And at the end of the day, if anything that I've been able to speak about or talk about with you can even help one person, then it's made it worth it.
Well, I know it definitely will make a great impact on many, Chris, and being able to sit here and talk with you has been an absolute honor, and I have taken so much away from it myself. So we want to thank you so much, not only for your service to our great country, but thank you for coming on today, Chris, for your openness, for sharing your light and story with all of us. Just absolutely tremendous. We can't thank you enough. And we thank your incredible wife, Lauren, and all of those who are caregivers and stand by the sides of our nation's wounded veterans. It's just, there are no words for it. So we thank you. We thank you to all the caregivers and spouses out there. Thank you again, Chris. That's it for this week's episode of Coach's Corner. We will return next Wednesday at 1 Eastern Time with another episode. Thank you again, Chris, for sharing your story and your light with us all today. Absolutely tremendous. Thank you to ClearBridge for your support of all things Catch a Lift. Thank you to Lynn Coughlin, Henry Pomper, and Kaylee Nasiri for making this podcast possible every single week. And thank you to the entire Cal team. Until next week, keep it real and stay Cal strong.